Welcome to the APMA Coding Resource Center, the finest foot and ankle coding resource that exists. Not just coding resource, but also compliance and documentation resource as well. This provides all the information you need to code appropriately, to document appropriately, and be sure that you are compliant with current guidelines. Having this available in an online format makes it incredibly convenient in that you can access it on a desktop, on a tablet, and on a mobile phone, which means you have it with you all the time, everywhere you go. No need to buy big, heavy, bulky books, which means if you go to a hospital, you have it with you. If you go to a nursing home, you have it with you. If you work anywhere other than just one location, you always have it with you. It is also constantly updated. So if something changes tomorrow, it will change on the Coding Resource Center tomorrow. More concerned about using old books. We see too many people run into trouble because they're using a book that's a year or two old and they wonder why they're not getting paid for something, and it turns out they're using a code that's been deleted. No need to buy new books every single year when you're using the APMA Coding Resource Center. So let's go through a brief tour of the Coding Resource Center to give you an idea of all that it offers. This is the home page, the landing page that we're looking at here. If you look across the top in this blue tab, you can see all the different sections, which of course include CPT, ICD10, HCPCS coding, and we will go through all of these. CCI edits, which tell you when you have two services for a Medicare patient if you need a modifier, and if so, which code to put the modifier on without guessing. Medicare LCDs, there are now MIPS resources, additional resources, crosswalk from ICD-9 to ICD-10 if you still have your ICD-9 codes memorized, and a relatively new feature, which is access to Coding Line, an online Q&A forum. So to go through some of these features, when we click on CPT, we can see that there is some organization to CPT. It's not just a bunch of long numbers. There is some organization here, almost like chapters. And if you hover over each of the sections, as we're doing right now, you can see the title for each of these sections. So this right away allows us to narrow down our selection. So a lot of us as foot and ankle specialists will spend our time here. So if we click on this, we'll see that this is organized exactly the way it is in the CPT book, with the codes being grouped by incision, excision, and then introduction or removal, repair, revision, reconstruction. If we were to continue down, we would see the fracture repair codes, arthrodesis codes, and then amputation codes. If we stop on any code, we can see that all the information that is provided for that code. So we just randomly ended up here on our tenolysis CPT code, and you can see for each code, it tells us what the global period is for that code, whether you can bill an assistant fee or not. So right away, that's a mistake a lot of people make, assuming they can always bill an assistant fee. That's not the case. If we look up here, we can see for this code, we are allowed to bill an assistant fee. For this code, we're not. We're also provided with non-facility RVUs, facility RVUs, and total work RVUs. Whether the code has a bilateral indicator or not, that's important. When a procedure is performed bilaterally, we need to know whether it has a bilateral indicator or not, because that dictates coding. If it does have a bilateral indicator, we use the 50 modifier. If it does not have a bilateral indicator, we do not use the 50 modifier. The CCI edits for that code, which we will go through in a bit. And then this is a feature that a lot of people like, which is the CPT to ICD10 tool. So this happens a lot where we might say, well, I know I did an extensor tenolysis. That's easy. I can find the code, but what are some ICD10 codes that I might consider using with that? Well, when you click on the CPT to ICD10 option, for each code, it opens up a drop-down box, which gives you some ideas of codes to consider using along with that CPT code. So we see the options that drop down from tenolysis. If we were to go up to another code here, here's repair of a flexor tendon. And again, we choose that CPT to ICD10 option. We get our drop down box. Sure enough, here's different options for rupture of tendons, codes that we might consider using with this CPT code. So that's a preview of the CPT section. If we bounce over here to ICD-10, the first thing that opens is what for some people is their favorite aspect of the Coding Resource Center. We can see there are lots of things to look at under the ICD-10 section, but the first thing that opens is this quick index, which is a list of ICD-10 codes in alphabetical order, and only those codes that are most commonly used by podiatrists. So we've selected the codes that are most commonly used by podiatrists, put them in alphabetical order. So we are no longer fishing through 70,000 plus ICD-10 codes to find the ones that we want. And you can see as we browse through here, abrasion, abscess, accessory bone, amputation, arthritis, you get the idea. These are in alphabetical order. These are the codes that we use most frequently as podiatrists. If, for example, you knew that you were looking for hallux valgus, you could click on the H and it will jump right to the H's. And we see in alphabetical order, hallux malleus, hallux rigis, hallux valgus, congenital versus acquired. If there's a dash at the end, that means the code is not complete and additional characters are required. And one option would be to click on the code itself, and it will take you to the full description of that code with the characters completed. But another option, which is even faster, is if we look at this hallux valgus with the dash at the end, telling us that the code is not complete, here's a shortcut without even having to go to another web page where it drops down the additional characters. This is yet another aspect of the Coding Resource Center that is so important, and where people get into trouble by trying to use free resources or even doing online searches for their codes is oftentimes those don't tell you when the code is complete and when additional characters are required. So here we see that M20.1 is hallux valgus, and it's only 4 characters right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This tells us that a 5th character is required to complete the code. And now with the 5th character, we have complete codes. This also would tell us if an additional code was required to complete the code. And I'll show you an example of that when we come to our ulcer code. So I clicked on U for ulcer, and a lot of us use these L97 codes for diabetic foot ulcers. So L97 is where we start for a diabetic foot ulcer code, and point 4 would tell us that we're dealing with a ulcer of the heel and or midfoot, but we're not done because it tells us we need a 5th character. When we jump out to our 5th character of 1 for right heel and midfoot, we're still not done. It tells us we need a 6th character. And it shows us what those 6 character options are. With no other indicator in front of this code, now we know we're done and no additional characters are required. If we go down to that bottom of that L97 section, it tells us code first, any associated underlying condition. And this is where a lot of people get into trouble by just using that L97 code only if there is an underlying condition like diabetes or atherosclerosis, which there very commonly is in podiatric care. That code is supposed to come first prior to the L97 code. And when using an online resource, or people that might say, well, I'm just going to look it up for free on the internet, this is the kind of guidance that you don't get there. And they often leave off that first code, and that is problematic in the case of an audit. And it is becoming more and more problematic as we get further into ICD-10. If we go back to the ICD-10 tab, when we clicked that, it opened up that quick index where we were spending our time, but there's so much more. There's even a sample Superbill. A lot of people are more comfortable working with a Superbill. It is live in that if there's a code with a dash at the end, we can click on that and it will open up our additional options to complete the code, as we see here, where that code needed additional characters. And it takes us all the way out to the 6th character where the code is complete. That's an online Superbill. If we go to the ICD-10 documentation library, there's even a printable Superbill. This is one that a lot of people really take advantage of. This at least gives us a starting point to find the codes that we might be using most frequently. And what you see here is the codes most frequently used by podiatrists. Continuing with our ICD-10 tab, again, it opens to this quick index, the codes most frequently used in alphabetical order. If you wanted all 70,000+, yes, of course, those are here. And they're here 2 different ways. One is in alphabetical order. This is every single ICD-10 code that exists. They're also in the tabular index, where you can see, similar to what we saw with CPT, these are categorized. They are in some order, so if you wanted to look through all the neoplasms, you could click there. If we close the tabular list, we also have the neoplasm table, FAQs, and additional guidelines for how to use ICD-10 coding, which is a good opportunity for beginners. If we jump over to our HCPCS tab, all of our HCPCS codes, commonly used DME items, modifiers for HCPCS codes. If we use, for example, let's say you're putting products on in your office and we want to search through the HCPCS coding, one option would be to search the entire coding resource center, but the search option that's more efficient is to first narrow it down to the page and then search on page. So we know we're looking for a HCPCS code, and let's just pick, for example, you're putting on a CTP product, a skin substitute product, and in this case it's Apligraf. So we know it's a HCPCS code, and we can click that find on page, and if we type in Apligraf on the bottom here and search, there it is. There is our product code for Apligraf. We'll then move over to the CCI edits. When it is a Medicare beneficiary and 2 services are provided, you might wonder, does it need a modifier? And if so, which code should I put the modifier on? And too many people make the mistake of guessing and thinking that the modifier always goes on the lesser valued code, which is often the case, but not always true. So let's say we perform G0127, a trimming of dystrophic nails, and a pairing of 1 callus, 11055. And we want to know, well, which one do I put the modifier in? This is an at-risk patient. They qualify for at-risk foot care. They had dystrophic nails trimmed and 1 callus paired. So we put those 2 codes in. We click go. It's going to run through the thousands and thousands of CCI edits that we have and show us that in this case, there's no pairing, which is very interesting because that tells us for a Medicare patient, no modifier is needed, which may come as a surprise to many of us. So now let's say all toenails were debrided. Now we have 11721 and 11055. All nails were debrided, so that's 11721. And 1 callus was paired, 11055. The column 2 code always takes the modifier. This is another really good example to look at because this may come to a surprise as far as which code takes the modifier. When there is a pairing, you need a modifier. When there is not a pairing, you do not need a modifier for a Medicare patient. And when there is a pairing, it is the column 2 code that takes the modifier, which in this case is 11721. If we move to our Medicare tab, this gives us all of our LCDs, no guessing as far as what needs to be documented. So you can change this to your state. I'm going to choose Pennsylvania, and it tells us who our Medicare carrier is, what your fee schedule is, know exactly what you get paid for every code. These are all of the LCDs and LCAs, local coverage articles, for Pennsylvania. So commonly used for us is routine foot care. We have an LCD and an LCA to help us with coding. We click on routine foot care. It tells us that it's taking us to a Medicare website. All of the documentation requirements for routine foot care in Pennsylvania. No guessing. It tells us exactly what we need. So no more of saying, well, where do I find that? Or how do I know? You also don't have to fight through the inefficient Medicare websites. You find it directly here from the Coding Resource Center. Our MIPS tab is relatively new, gives us the codes that we need for reporting our quality measures. We hear a lot that people say, okay, I understand the measure, I know how to perform it, I know what to document, but how do I code it? If I'm reporting via claims or registry, what code do I put down? So if we click on our quality measures, we can look by registry or via claims. I clicked on claims here. It drops down most commonly used quality measures for podiatrists. And we can see all of these quality measures here. Let's say, for example, you perform the eye exam measure and you say, but I don't know what code to put down. Well, here it is. Tells us the code options for if the performance was met right here, and then the code options for if performance was not met. It tells us exactly which code to put on the claim form. There are additional references over here under the References tab, all in alphabetical order. You're able to build a favorites. So if you have some codes that you use quite a bit, you can highlight them in your favorites, which we will go through in our favorites video. And finally, the option that so many people are excited about is with your Coding Resource Center subscription, you get, it's included, a subscription to Coding Line, which is an online Q&A forum. The Coding Resource Center allows you to look up all the things that you want, as we've just modeled, but doesn't really give you the option to ask questions. For example, if you say, I did procedure A, B, and C on this patient, how do I code that? There's nowhere on the Coding Resource Center to put that in and get an answer the next day. There is somewhere to do that on Coding Line within the Coding Resource Center, and this comes with your Coding Resource Center subscription. So if you click Coding Line, it opens this Coding Line window where you can enter any question you want. You can post a new topic, as I've clicked there, put in the title, ask your question, hit submit, it gets presented before a panel of experts, and you get an answer within a day or two. There's also a forum of over 10 years and thousands of questions that have been asked in the past. So for example, you can search that forum. Let's say you wanted to look up the code for a sesamoidectomy, maybe. You can see this is something that's been searched before here, so it gets highlighted. You search that, and every post that deals with code for sesamoidectomy comes up. And you can browse through these, look for the codes that might be of interest to you. Click on one if you think that might be the winner, and here you see the question that was posed, and then the answer that was given, along with the author who wrote that. You can see there are certified coders on here answering your coding questions. So that's an idea of what Coding Line looks like. We hope you enjoyed this tour of the Coding Resource Center and that you found it useful. If you ever have any questions or feedback or comments, we want to hear from you. You can go down to the bottom here, type in your question, and hit submit. We hope that you will continue to subscribe or become a subscriber if you're not already one. Thanks for viewing.